The Franchise Show. I hope you're all doing well. This is the show where we get under the hat of some of the most important topics in franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's 5:15 for about 50 minutes in the UK, or 12:15 if you're in America, or 9:15. Depends where you are in the world. So if you are here live, please add a comment, and we love you to be part of the conversation. So what do we do? Each week we take a new topic and we have a lovely guest. And today is no exception to that. We have a fantastic guest today. And the topic we're going to be discussing today is when franchises stop making money. But of course, we're going to get into all the reasons why hopefully that won't happen, and what we can do and where we can get our money from. So my guest today is my good friend and fellow live streamer, Carl Dakin. Carl, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Thanks, Harvey. It's a pleasure to be on the show. For everybody in the audience, when they say let's host a drink, because it's 5 o'clock somewhere, it's now 5 o'clock at Harvey's place. And even though it's only 10:15 in Denver, I can host a drink and know I'm still in Harvey's time.
That's it. It is 5 o'clock somewhere, and it's 5 o'clock right here. although I have some squash here, but it is in a beer glass. So anyway, thank you so much, Carl. I appreciate you stepping in to the guest hot seat last minute for us. Our guest originally was going to be Neil Muttock from Evolve, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So it's fantastic to have you here. And perhaps you could, for everybody listening, explain a little bit about what it is that you do, so that we can sort of set the scene.
Sure. Thanks, Harvey. So I provide services as a coach who assists small businesses and communities, other organizations in raising funding. So if you've seen any sport where the coach draws up the plays, work with the players to get them to perform the plays for their own success and the success of their teams, I do that in raising funding. So designing, staging, and supporting capital campaigns for all kinds of funding from all kinds of sources. And as a consequence of that, I call myself the capital coach, and I do what I can to help everybody out with their funding needs.
Fantastic. And as you said, you are based in Denver in the US. So we're going to have a discussion today focused a little bit around funding and how we can put together different types of funding and different types of funding packages for, obviously in this case, our franchise businesses. But from your perspective, a franchise business or another business, you've got similar considerations. But before we get into the conversation today, I would like to welcome a few people who have joined us here live already. We have the ever wise Simon Wise. Always good to have Simon with us. Welcome to the show, Simon. He's put, hello, franchise friends. We have the lovely Nick Plevin. Nick is one of our lovely sponsors from Talent, and great to have you with us. Going to be interesting to hear your thoughts on the conversation today. And we have the lovely Penny Hopkinson, and again, Penny is one of our lovely sponsors, and I will put a QR code up, but I always like to put a book up. And is it going to be the right way around? It is. There it is. Manual magic, all about your manuals. So if you want to learn about that, please reach out to Penny. And we've got the lovely Tim Morris with us. Always lovely to have Tim with us. Tim is a great name in franchising here in the UK, helps high performing franchise businesses and franchisees. And he's put, hi everyone, great to be here this evening. Well, it's great to have you here. Carl, let's get into this. I think a good place for us perhaps to start is, so let's take a new franchisee, and they're in any franchise business and they've got to put together a sum of money. I mean, typically, and I know it's different for different parts of the world, but from your perspective in the US, what sort of stack or what sort of sources do you typically call upon for funding of sort of these types of businesses?
Yeah, so a franchisee in starting up their business, working in concert with the franchisor, is going to need so much money in order to start up and conduct their operations. And we talk about this in terms of having positive cash in an account as needed, when needed, to do all the things that need to be done. So, in one of the first things you would do is you would create a cash flow projection for your business, which is part of your business plan. It would lay out the money you're going to spend month in, month out, from the very day you open your business until the day that you have a sustainable operation with more revenue coming in than expenses. So you're clearly ahead of the game from a cash flow standpoint. That money can come from a variety of sources. Most bankers would prefer that you put up a significant amount of your own money out of your own back pocket from savings or some other thing, because it demonstrates that you have skin in the game. You're really invested. You're not using other people's money where you may not be as careful with it as you might be with your own money. And a classical common capital stack, which is two types of funding at the same time, would be some cash. That would be 20% maybe of your total budget for a term of time. And the rest could be borrowed money that you might get from a bank or other type of lending or financing program. Now, depending upon the economy, depending upon other factors, the bankers or whoever you're borrowing from may want more money on the table. So instead of a 20-80 rule of debt to equity to debt, you may have to go to 30, 40, 50, or even 60% of the money has to be in cash, has to be an asset of some kind in order to borrow money for the balance of whatever you need to do. Now, this ratio is very important because the cash part of it, money, if it's invested in your business from a third party, this is the most expensive money you're likely to have, meaning that the price of money for using that money is going to be higher than what it would be if you borrowed it from a bank. Even if a bank is demanding high rates, 12, 13, 14, 15%, or a credit card, which goes up to 30% here in the US, this still may be cheaper than what you would give up in future revenue or future profits to an equity investor. And so you as a franchisee, a small business owner, have to think through both the short and long-term needs of your company. You want to lower or minimize your cost of money so that more money falls to the bottom line, which is where your pocket is at. And at the end of the day, you're the one who deserves to be rewarded for doing all the hard work.
Absolutely. Some really interesting points you've made there. I mean, today's discussion is when franchises stop making money. Now, of course, that's something that hopefully will never happen and certainly should never happen. And, I'm going to pick up on something you've said there that I think is really important. And it's making sure you've got the right plan in place at the beginning. It's the preparation, isn't it? That cash flow projection, that is vital, not only for the people that are lending you money, whether that is a bank, whether that is private equity, whether that's crowdfunding, whoever that is, they're going to want as much security as they can that they're going to get that money back and the interest that goes with it. So, yeah, that cash flow projection is really vital to ensure that you know continue to make money in the right way. How do you go about sort of guiding people with that cash flow projection when you've got things like seasonal variations or economic variations, which are very hard to predict sometimes? You just have to have a buffer in there.
Well, any time you do a projection, you getting out your crystal ball and looking into the future.
Yeah.
And so far, I've been able to prove that no one is 100% accurate all the time in making forecasts about the future. So what you can do is you can use your knowledge, your skill, and quite likely the skill of others who may have other experience, other perspectives, to try to create that forecast going forward, making reasonable assumptions about certain things that are likely to happen. And this serves as a baseline for what you're going to do. So, for example, if you were going to set up a new coffee franchise, you may
Good
decide
example. Good
you want
example.
a great example. But you may decide, well, I want to build it on this empty lot in this street corner where there is lots of foot traffic and street traffic and great location. But then you're going, well, I need to buy the land and I'm going to spend my money on day one. Then I have to get all the permits and so forth from the city in order to put a building on that. So I've got to go through the process of getting permits. I then engage people to build the building, and then I have to buy equipment to put into the building. And we may be taking in some places in the United States, that may take 3 years between these 2 points when no revenue is coming in the door. And that means that on your cash flow projection, you've got money going out, nothing coming in. And your projection says, okay, I understand that this is going to be an investment into the business so that at some later time, I have to recapture not only the money I put in, but the value of that money over the time until I get to a break-even point. And so creating a cash flow projection is essentially a combination of people, hopefully more than one person, who's looking at what you're trying to do and trying to determine what is the likely out-of-pockets that are going to occur. Then you allow a little bit of a buffer, as you called it, Harvey, for things that might happen but are low probability. And then even some insurance maybe for things that might happen but very, very low probability. And your goal, again, is throughout this entire time period, until the company reaches a point of profitability when it's truly sustainable, you have to have enough money to get to that point. Quite often, a small business will underestimate the cost. They find themselves 10 feet short of the goal line with no energy, no money, no ability to move the ball a few more feet to get to the goal. So it's very, very important that in doing these cash flow projections, that you do not underestimate. And at the same time, though, because you're paying for the use of the money, you don't want to grossly overestimate how much it's going to be, because you're paying for the use of that money when you're not using it. It ends up being a form of self-insurance. There will be a cost associated with it. And you do want to have cash on hand. So it's part of the planning process.
I think that's really interesting, especially what you said there about that you're paying for the use of it if you don't need it, if you overborrow to give yourself that confidence that you're going to cover out some of the things that might occur in the economy or in your business. But that's going to that extra reassurance is going to have a cost to the business. I think the other thing that you said on the other side of it, you know, if you have underestimated that and you're just short of where you should be, you know, and you've got to stop because you just don't have the cash flow to continue, you know, that would be incredibly frustrating. So getting the balance right is really key here to ensure your franchise continues making money. or even in this case starts to make some money by the time it's recovered that capital. Before we continue, let's just introduce a couple more people that have joined us here live. We've got the lovely Julie Waits, and she's put evening from a cold but sunny northeast. Well, it was earlier today. It's always great to have you here, Julie. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on all things financial and money, and how we keep our franchisees successful in financial terms. I always talk about franchisees should be happy and successful. And that's not always money, but it's certainly a key to this. When you invest, and we talk about investing in a franchise business, and when Carl spoke there about the deposit element, the skin in the game, that part of the business comes from a prospective franchisee who is investing their own money in their chosen franchise business. So, it is an investment, and therefore it's really important to think about that return. I'll also recognize the fact that we've got the wonderful Don Cohen with us today. Now, Don is a mutual friend and colleague of both myself and Carl, and has taught us both everything we know about live streaming. Please connect with Don. If you like what we do, then you must connect with Don. He's a fabulous chap and can teach you a lot of things. He's but great to be here with Carl and Harvey, among my best LinkedIn friends and collaborators. Well, same goes to you, Don. Carl, I think it would be a good idea to talk about return on investment. Again, this is a really key element to a franchise and a franchise business. And it's certainly something that most people will be asked about. They're going to say, well, okay, I'm investing X amount of tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds into this business. When am I going to see that money back? And then when am I going to actually start to see, a profit coming after that? What do you think is a reasonable time frame to get an investment back? I suppose it depends on the circumstance, but
Well, yeah, every business is unique. I've used the example, again, using coffee shops, because I know that's one of Harvey's favorite topics, that I could start a coffee shop on one corner of an intersection in January of this year, another one in April, yet another one in August, and one next month. And each of these coffee shops might be selling relatively the same kind of coffee at the same price point, but the businesses are all different because they have different managers. They're in a different location, even though in close proximity, and they all start at different times. So when they entered the market, different factors may have influenced the price of money, price of equipment, other things going on. So as we look at this, asking the question of what kind of return, that same business will have an inherent cap or limit on how much money can be made. I was just reviewing some statistics yesterday for my own show earlier this morning about Bitcoin. The average business in the United States only makes 7 to 10% profit margin on their business. And that's assuming that they've accounted properly for the time of the people running the business, which is a common mistake, that they fail to do that. But if a business makes 10%, that is the rate of return on that business. So if you've invested all this money into setting up the business and getting it to a point of profitability, the profits represent the basis for your return. And the business may have a limit on how much money it can make. You can hope for more or like to get more, but the business is whatever it's going to be. So anyone who's starting a business has to think about their time, their own money, their reputation, everything they're putting into getting that business started as an investment. And they may come back and they go, yeah, the profits aren't that high, but I paid myself a good wage in addition to the profits I'm making on my investment. I might like what I'm doing, meaning that I'd rather do this than work for somebody else. So there's what we call non-monetary benefits that come out of the investment. This may work in a variety of other fashions. There's other things that might be aligned or associated with this that all represent benefits to the person. But the first thing you've got to do after you invest is you got to get your money back. And some people commonly misunderstand this. This is called the return of principal or return of the investment, which it has to occur before you can get a return on the investment. So if I put $100,000 into starting up a new business, until I get my $100,000 back, there is no rate of return. I'm simply trying to get my principal of my investment back. It's only after I've been repaid the entirety of my investment that every extra dollar becomes a return on the investment, the ROI of that particular situation. And I was sending some emails back and forth with a client of mine this morning where he's going, look how much profit this investor would get from that. And I said, no, you left in the principal. We have to take that out of the equation before we calculate the ROI. It's only after they get their money back. And then, that affects how you calculate what is the true rate of return, because again, time value of money has to be factored in. So these are things that I work with all the time. So to me, any business that pays the principals, the owners, a reasonable wage market rate for their time and still has a profit left over at the end of the day, that is doing okay. It's not going to get you written up in Inc. magazine. It's not going to get you necessarily as a news item of a super entrepreneur, but you're profitable, you're sufficient, you have a sustainable operation, and that's a starting point. If you do not like if you're running a coffee shop and you're making a 10% profit every year, good for you, but you're not going to make the same level of profit as a company might make that's selling a brand new widget or technology innovation or something like that, where there's a higher margin, or a software as a service company where you expect higher margins because there's less capital involved and there's a higher profit margin associated with that. So every business is different. And the key thing is for the people who start the business to be happy with whatever profit margin they're able to attain. And as long as they're attaining a profit margin every day, they can still be there to run the business tomorrow.
I mean, you make some fantastic points. Before we respond to those, I just want to recognize a few more people that have joined us here live today. We'll start with Joe Caruso, because I've got his comment up there on the screen. He's put, great to be here in the presence of the illustrious Harvey Tuck. Well, I'm not sure about that, but that's fantastic. And terrific to meet Carl. Happy to be here. Well, it's always happy to have you with us, Joe, and really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on cash flow and money and profitability and how we go about approaching that in our franchise businesses. I think this is going to be a conversation that would need several angles and probably several goes on the show, and we probably still won't get to the bottom of it, but it's a great conversation to have. We've got some fantastic comments coming up here from Julie, from Simon, and from Tim. But before we do that, let's just recognize the fact that we also have the wonderful Neil Newman, and he is here from Gather, one of our lovely sponsors, and I will put your QR code up. It has been up, my friend. And he's put, hello all, looking forward to hearing more today. Well, so are we. And while we're talking about surveys, there's a QR code on the screen right now, top left. Click that QR code if you're watching it now or in the future, and that's going to give you the opportunity to come up with topics for this show in the future and to tell us what you think of it. It's really important. This show is all about you. It's all about our community. So it's very important to make sure that we get your thoughts. And we've got Omar here. Omar does a fantastic couple of shows, Zoom Party and Do We Really Know Them, which is where he interviews various fascinating people about their journeys. So great to have you here. Let's I'm going to quickly touch on a comment that Julie has got, because I just need a bit of clarification, because I suspect this was a historic point. What's the number one mistake that franchisees make when that happens? Julie, can you remind me what we were talking about when you asked that question? And we will certainly come back to that one. I'm going to now come on to a comment we've got from Simon. Then we're going to move on to one from Tim, one from Joe, and introduce some more people that are here. So Simon has put a very interesting discussion in light of the recent budget in the UK. Franchisors have got to get the numbers right from the start. Charge franchisees too much in royalty payments. You give them no chance to mitigate rising labour costs, for example, while still staying competitive in the consumer business market. Absolutely. Getting the balance right between how much you're charging your franchisees in royalties and how much they're going to make in that profit. You know, you spoke there, Carl, about 7 to 10% in a business. You know, if you're charging a franchisee 7 to 10% in royalties, you've got to make sure that they can also make a good return as well. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so to that point, Harvey, the royalty represents a different form of investment into the franchisee. So when I talk about a 7 to 10% profit margin, that's after paying any fee or royalty to the franchisor. And the franchisor is essentially providing a framework, a brand, systems, process, a whole variety of things that are all essential to the operation of a particular business. It has its own value. A person could start a business on their own without working with a franchisor, and they're going to have to develop all these things. And it's going to take time to build them, polish them out, make them work well. We often talk about entrepreneurs learning everything about running a business, where their investment is essentially a payment of tuition by the investors into the knowledge building of the entrepreneur, which is something investors don't like to do. So the shortcut is, instead of spending a longer runway to get up to speed to optimize your business and its operations, you pay a fee to someone who's already been there, done that. That's what a franchisor brings to the table. So it is true that a royalty can be too high, that it doesn't represent a fair value. And I'm using this very broadly, very softly at the same time. But if a franchisor is charging more than the value they bring, then it is going to burden the franchisee, because the franchisee is going to have to go out and get that value somewhere else. And that contributes to their overall budget, and that's going to ultimately impact their profitability. Because if they pay the franchisor for one thing and then they have to go build it themselves, they've paid twice, and their business model probably won't withstand that kind of double charge. So it's important, but the issues of labor and other things are to some degree independent of the royalty. So I don't know that there's necessarily going to be a correlation between those. But if the franchisor can aid the franchisee in reducing their labor costs, that is part of the value that they bring to them through this relationship, then that's very helpful to the franchisee, and it will mitigate some of that potential problem.
Absolutely. We've got a few comments coming up here, so let's bring a few up here. This is clarification on Julie's point here. Okay, so Julie has put, what is the biggest mistake that franchisees make when they stop making money? I know, Carl, you're not necessarily immersed in the franchise space, but you are immersed in the investment space, of which, of course, you get lots of businesses, I'm sure, making mistakes that hinder their ability to continue to make money. What would you say that the biggest mistake that businesses make that sort of gives that cash flow problem, and their businesses then falter? Because I'm sure we're getting an opinion from our wonderful community, but I'm sure similar things sometimes can apply in the franchise world.
Well, within the very narrow framing of when a franchise quits making money, that typically is a reflection of something has happened. It assumes within the question that the franchise was making money, that it was profitable, and then something happened that caused it to no longer make money. And that typically is a reflection of a change in the market, such as one mentioned earlier, an increased cost of labor. But it could be an increased cost of supplies. It could be higher taxes from the local government, but it's a variety of different things that can impact a business that are normal and to some degree predictable. And therefore, for a franchise to get to a point where it's no longer making revenue, it has failed to adapt. It is basically implemented a process, a system, a way of doing business, and it did not change when it needed to change. Here in the United States, we saw labor rates go up. Guess what? Everybody raised the price of their products and services. It was an automatic pass-through type of a thing. But if you did not pass those costs through by higher pricing, that is taking it directly out of the profit margin of your business. And at some point, a low profit margin is almost a guarantee for failure.
I mean, you've made some really, really good points there. I mean, like you say, for a franchise business to stop making money, you have to assume that it was making money. And then there has to be something that's changed. And it's about identifying what's changed and seeing how you can adapt your business. And as a franchise business, yes, you're running your own business and you need to look at these things yourself, but you also have a franchisor who's there to support you, and they can be looking at it as well. So you have double the amount of eyes on things like costs and the market, and therefore hopefully you have double the amount of eyes, double the amount of chance of seeing those things.
You also have all the other franchisees. One of the benefits of being a franchisee is that you are part of a community of franchisees. So you have your own perspective, you have that of the franchisor who really wants you to succeed because they are dependent upon your success to be successful. But you can share information with anyone else who's a franchisee, which could represent a very large group of people with a very diverse amount of skill and experience and perspective. And your ability to access that information is one of the great values of being a franchisee.
Absolutely. Let's go to a question that we've got here. We've got a good one coming up from Joe. And we've also got one here from Tim. So let's have a look at what Tim's got to say. Tim's put, Carl, we talk about financial planning when launching a business. It's such an important aspect of developing a successful franchise. What are your thoughts in helping a prospective franchisee who has limited experience, knowledge, and understanding of accounting and financial planning? Yeah, this is a really interesting one. I mean, I'm sure you deal with people who come to you with an idea, right? They've got an idea. They're passionate about the idea. They can see the end goal there, and whether that's a franchise business, they want to invest in that. But there's lots of people, particularly in franchising, I think, that don't necessarily have all of the skills that they would need to start a business independently of a franchise. And that's why they're getting into franchising, because they've got a proven model, because they've got the support of the franchisor. And like you rightly mentioned, the support of the other franchisees. But what are your thoughts in, how you might help or guide somebody with very limited knowledge? Is it seek expert advice, I suppose?
Well, yeah, I have a number of projects and clients right now who very well fit this definition, where I ask for a cash flow projection and the response is, what's that? And now we're off to the races because this cash flow projection is the very fundamental starting point for figuring out how to craft an investment offering. I can't put a price. I cannot divide up future profits without knowing what those profits are going to be, and making sure that this projection is legitimate and reasonable enough to earn the credibility of the people who are reviewing it to take a look at it. So when I have somebody present themselves who is gung-ho to go run a business, yes, in certain cases, a franchisee is the best route to go, because a lot of these issues have already been dealt with. It's no longer, well, what if this might be a successful business? We already know that because it's already been done by the franchisor and the other franchisees who are out there. That still doesn't necessarily solve the problem of a person who is underskilled, with limited experience in running a business or understanding all the elements of finance and accounting and everything that goes into that. So when that occurs, two things should happen. One is the person should be advised to put themselves into some form of training program. It may be self-taught, it may be something you download off of LinkedIn, or whatever, but you need to get your skill set up, and you need to do it in an intentional, methodical manner. The second thing is you should recognize your shortfall, and you should immediately fill that with a gap somehow. This may be adding somebody to your board of directors or board of managers who assumes this responsibility for the operation of your business. It could be a lesser relationship, but still strong, in the form of a board of advisor, where you have someone who looks over your stuff occasionally, like a mentor, and gives you input on what to do. It may be an outside consultant, like myself, when raising funding, or it may be a tax attorney, or whatever it happens to be. I myself recommend to all of my clients that they have as large of a board of advisors as they can reasonably manage, that fills all the knowledge gaps of any question that may pop up during daily operations. The contractors can fill those in as well. Sometimes you'll have a dual relationship where an advisor can tip over occasionally and become a consultant outside of their advisor position. But you need to have somebody who knows what's going on. Lack of knowledge is almost certainly going to cause pain and suffering down the road, and may cause absolute failure of the business.
I think it's really interesting. You mentioned there about some self-teaching as well, and I think that that's really relevant in franchising. Actually, I think there's always a mistake that people think that everything is going to be handed to you and you're told everything that you've got to do. Well, you're handed fantastic tools, and you're handed a proven model, but you're the one who's got to work it. And that's why it's very interesting. You said that earlier on, you get all sorts of different franchisees, different situations, different companies, and all sorts of different results. And it's the ones who put in that effort, the ones who really use those tools to the best of their abilities, that the ones that are the most successful. Let's have a look at a comment. We've got a great comment here from Joe Caruso. Let's have a look at this one. And Joe's put, Carl, how many years do you find attractive for cash on cash return of the initial investment after fully burdening the P&L for management labor? It's a really interesting question. What's reasonable on that return? What do you make of that one?
Yeah, so if I'm the business owner, my goal is to get to profitability as soon as possible. And then that's driven partly by how much money I have in my pocket, and I'm concerned that I'll run out of runway before I become profitable. But once I become profitable, as I said, if I'm paying myself a market rate for my time, independent of the profitability of the business, then as long as I'm able to pay myself, after that, I don't care so much, because I'm doing what I want to do. I'm getting paid market rate for my time. Life may not get much better than that. If I'm using other people's money, then the game changes massively at that point, because every investor has their own needs, their own requirements, what they want to see come out of an investment. If somebody came to me and said, I want to invest in a coffee shop and I want 100% return on my money, I would just start laughing at them, because I don't see that as being a possibility. Now, I did work with a coffee shop earlier this year that had come up with a proprietary blending of medicinal mushrooms with the coffee, and their method of infusing that into the coffee. So it was no longer so much a coffee as it was a nutraceutical. And in that case, it's a whole new ball game. They might make all kinds of high profit margins over time as they make this available to a larger marketplace. But
I would have thought, Carl, if they're using mushrooms, their profits are going to be particularly high. Not those types.
different kind of mushroom. Now, here in Denver, we've legalized those kinds of mushrooms, so it could be either one. And clarification was appropriate. So thanks, Harvey.
Fantastic.
But yeah, no, you have to look at the investor issue. When somebody says, "Well, what's an appropriate rate of return?" I'm like, "Is it your business or is it an outside investor?" And if it's outside investor, then I need to ask them, what is it that you're looking to achieve? We'll have people say, I would be happy getting 5 to 10% interest a year with a solid, safe investment. We'll have angels who talk about 20% or more per year, or 100% or more per year as you move up into the venture capital range. They're all different. They're all over the place, and they're all unique to whoever that investor is. Part of what I do in my investment planning is trying to figure out who are the right investors who will match with a particular business, so that we have a pairing that makes sense and we don't have a mismatch where the expectations are all out of whack.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a couple of good questions coming up. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking when franchises stop making money and how to avoid that. And it's been a fascinating conversation so far. At this point, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a favor. You'll notice the QR code on your right-hand side of the screen is now suggesting that you could support a collaborative article that I've written. I'd like to keep my little LinkedIn top voice badge. So could you scan the QR code if you're watching this? Have a look at it. If you think it's valuable, and only if you think it's valuable, put a little like on it. That would help me out very much. Thank you. Right, let's get back into this. We've got a great comment coming up here from Joe, and we've got a good one here from Simon. So let's put Simon's up, which is probably going to cover the QR code now, but let's see. So Simon's put, Carl, as an investment expert, does franchising stack up well in the market as a vehicle for capital growth and return on investment for an individual or even a private equity investor, for example? Yeah, that's a great question. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm going to give you the ultimate "it depends" kind of an answer. And the reason for that is a franchise stacks up better than a startup business because it's using a proven business model where all the details have been worked out. In effect, the only variable that's been entered into this equation is the franchisee and their ability to manage this system in their own self-interest as they operate their particular business. At that point, franchising has a clear advantage in speed to market, known systems, known profitability potential. However, depending on what the franchise is doing, if I'm doing coffee versus running a car wash business or some other type of business, all these businesses have different profitability potentials, and therefore their investment is different. And so if you're saying, well, just because I invested in a franchise, am I good? Probably so. But at the same time, you may not get a great rate of return because of the necessary inherent limitations in the nature of the business. And in the case of a franchisee, you'll have other factors such as location, the management team, and things like that to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at Joe's comment. I always like to try and get to all the comments that people are putting on here, because as I say, this show is absolutely about our community. And so these points are really important to us. And Joe's put, in the better franchise systems, the franchise owner is in a business with a franchisor with a tried and true model with extensive support. And in the lesser and often nascent franchise
Nathan.
systems,
Yeah.
that is often not the case. And the franchisor is just a small business owner who is masquerading as a polished franchise brand and no proven model. I think this is a really interesting point here, because when you are getting into a franchise business, or if you're looking at that, and when you're looking at your investment and looking at making money, you really want to be looking at one that will support you, has got a tried and tested system. So it's important to do your due diligence and you know, and do your research beforehand to make sure it ticks those boxes. What
Yeah,
do you
I totally agree. I mean, technically, a new franchisor is a form of startup business, which means it has all the associated issues of less runway, less proven, less credibility, less whatever. And it, as a consequence, if you are a franchisee or a future franchisee looking for true stability, this is the wrong place to go, because there's more risk associated with a startup or early stage franchisor than there is for a long-term, very stabilized one. On the other hand, if you have cash in your pocket and you don't need to raise outside money, you may find a very early stage franchisor represents a bigger.
Carl's disappeared. Magic. Get him back.
Yeah,
There he is.
I'm taking magic classes over the weekend, so I can disappear.
I
But
should have done a
the
puff of
point,
smoke then when you disappeared.
yeah, actually, that was I was referring to Bitcoin in an article I published in my newsletter yesterday. I go, "Where's the magic end?" Um, So in this case, though, you may find like there's a brand new product, and maybe the franchisor is rushing to market to realize the potential of a market opportunity. There isn't time to put all the systems in place, and that creates a level of risk, but there may or may not be a higher reward. You have to look at that. I constantly tell people higher risk does not necessarily mean higher reward, it just means higher risk. In some cases, it's a good decision to go with an early franchisor with an upside potential. In other cases, it doesn't fit the person who's looking for a more stable business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Simon's made a point here, invest with the latter and you're sure to go skint very quickly. I think you're absolutely right. But there are good new franchise businesses, but they do carry with them franchising is about a proven model. And that word proven has to apply, even if it's a newer franchise business. So if you're planning to launch a franchise business, you've got to prove your model. You've got to have a strong foundation, so that you can offer a potential franchisee that value, and you spoke very wisely, Carl, about that value. Look, this has been a fascinating conversation today, really, really interesting. And I know it's one that we're going to have again from many different perspectives as we talk about numbers and finance and profit and all these things. But we have come to the end of another fantastic episode. So I would like to thank everybody who has been here live with us today. It's always fantastic to have you with us live. You make this show. You're what this show is about. You drive it. You're the directors, the producers of this show. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us today. I'd also like to thank Carl for joining us today. Carl, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you on. You'll have to come on again next year as well, and we can continue this discussion. But thank you so much for your time today, Carl.
Thank you, Harvey. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your audience today.
My absolute pleasure. So before we finish off the day, let's just talk about what's happening later this week. So on Franchising Brand Stories, so this is Thursday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. We are finding out what's under the hat of fast signs with John Davies. So please join us for that one. And next week on the Franchise Show, this is Tuesday, 3rd of December, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. We are talking to Andrew Walters, and the topic is going to be franchise laziness. So make sure you've had a good sleep and that you're well energized for this one. And we look forward to you joining us for that one as well. So until next time, my friends, take very good care. Cheerio.